I work for NASA, but I couldn't resist starting my presentation today by giving you a quote from Thales, 2,600 years ago, one of your forefathers, perhaps an inspiration. Thales was asked by his disciples, "What is the most difficult thing?" And he answered, "To know thyself." And then another disciple asked him, "So what's the easiest thing?" And he said, "To give advice to others." Then there was Socrates, 2,400 years ago. 2,400 years ago. Socrates said, "I can't teach you anything, but I can stimulate you to think." I want to stimulate you to think, and I want to stimulate you to act, and I want to stimulate you based on the work that I've been doing. But first, in the name of evolution, let's consider a long way back. Let's consider our ancient ancestors. Let's consider that evolutionary pathway that took us through all of these amazing changes. And by the way, I don't mean to be biased and show just a man, because in fact, women were just as important in this evolutionary process. But the evolutionary process, as you noticed, is really a question of an evolution of tools. The extensions of ourselves, the extensions of our hands and of our ability to move and our ability to remember, our ability to think, our ability to build. These were evolutionary, but they were also revolutionary. They were revolutionary because they were a gradual change that manifested at different times because of the importance of what was going on. It's not to say that we didn't store information, that we didn't think about things early on when we were still hunters and gatherers. Of course, we had systems for communicating, we had systems for remembering and for drawing, we had cave paintings and we had language. We had tools and we built things. But if you think about it, this was all about the problem of food, water, and energy. The crux of the matter was food. We needed food, and we developed first the ability to make tools that helped us gather food, hunt food, and then we started to cultivate food. Think of it. We grew animals. We grew crops. In fact, now we cover an area the size of South America with our agriculture. We cover the area of Africa with our animals, our livestock. We're a huge impact on the world. And we're cultivating, not just hunting and gathering, we're cultivating. This is about access and it's about storage. And then water. Water's an incredibly important issue. Here we're hunting and gathering. And we're changing our storage by our industry. We're building huge dams. And we're moving water. We've moved water around the globe for a long time. We're smart in our ability to do that. And what about energy? All of this depends on energy. What are we doing for our energy? Mostly hunting and gathering. Of course, we use hydropower, we use solar power, we use nuclear power. But mostly, we're hunting and gathering fossil forms of energy. But I want to talk to you about the next revolution. And the next revolution is going to be incredibly important. And that revolution has to do with a transition and no longer hunting and gathering our water, and no longer hunting and gathering our energy, and no longer treating food the same way and limiting our food production to land. The next generation is going to be doing things that are different and based on some kind of sustainable system. And that sustainability is going to be based on technologies that form a kind of interrelatedness that's like an ecosystem. So what is sustainable that we can observe? Ecosystems are sustainable. The ecosystem that I want to talk to you about is perhaps one of the ultimate goals that we're going to be developing as a species, and we call it Omega. The project is called Omega. It's for coastal cities to transform solar energy into sustainable biofuels, electricity, and heat, to expand food production and access to clean water, to eliminate pollution and enhance the coastal environment. Ultimately, it's a project to develop sustainable green economies. Let me tell you how it works. Omega uses protected bays like San Francisco Bay, vast areas which will get even bigger with sea level rise. And most importantly, they already have wastewater treatment plants that currently dump wastewater into the bays. But for Omega, this wastewater is a resource, redirected into floating clear plastic tubes to grow microalgae, the fastest growing plants on the planet and the best producers of oil. The algae grow using nutrients in wastewater, and they use concentrated CO2 from a source like flue gas, which means Omega treats wastewater and captures and controls a major greenhouse gas. The Omega infrastructure is used for solar electricity and concentrated solar thermal. And in some locations, wave-powered generators and wind turbines will also provide power. In addition to energy, the Omega offshore platform supports aquaculture and produces high-quality food without using land and without using water. In fact, saving water is a big deal. It's estimated that by the year 2030, half of all the people in the world will face water shortages. And the current map of water scarcity shows in red that there are already many places in desperate need of clean water. Adapting methods developed for the space station for recycling water, Omega transforms wastewater into clean water using 1/3 the energy required to make clean water from seawater. Think about it. The integrated Omega components are modular, and they can be scaled up without using land. For example, the wastewater from one of the treatment plants in San Francisco will support a 1,280-acre Omega system and produce between 2 and 6 million gallons of biofuels each year. And what will be the environmental impact of a full-scale Omega system? It will be like a huge kelp bed or floating reef that will provide a place for organisms to grow and forage, a refuge and nursery for fish and birds. So it is likely to increase local biodiversity and even enhance commercial fisheries. Omega improves the environment by treating wastewater and capturing CO2. It increases the availability of clean drinking water by recycling wastewater, supplies food without competing with agriculture, and it provides solar energy as electricity, heat, and biofuels. All things that help move us toward a green economy and a sustainable society. Omega, it's more than a dream. From 2009 until last year, Omega feasibility studies were funded by NASA and the California Energy Commission. And the Omega research team did a lot. We engineered floating plastic bioreactors to grow algae that cleaned wastewater and made biofuels. We built remote control systems and developed harvesting methods. We studied the strength and durability of critical materials, the fluid dynamics of different designs, the effects of biofouling and of cleaning, the impact of toxins from wastewater, and the role of pests that eat algae on the system's productivity. Basically, we monitored, measured, and manipulated everything we could think of for laboratory and tank experiments. And we did some experiments offshore to explore the impact of Omega on the marine environment and the impact of the marine environment on Omega. We also did techno-economic analyses to determine the returns on investments for products and services from Omega. I summarized this work in my TED Global talk. And you can find links to our publications on our Facebook page. This Omega system is the answer to sustainability for coastal cities. So the Omega project, which started as a NASA project to do biofuels, turned into an integrated system, an ecology of technologies. What we learned with the $10.8 million was a way to make an economically and energetically functional, sustainable system. And we got pretty far along. By the time we finished this project, we knew how all the components were going to work together. The big challenge was how to build the first offshore system that would function as this integrated system. And in order to do that, we have started the Omega Global Initiative. I would like you to find out about this initiative because, as I said at the beginning, I want you to act. You can look at this website and find out about what we're doing. But basically, the idea is to get from the concept of Omega to a functional commercial system by mitigating the risk in between. And we're going to do that by very systematically looking and discovering places that are ideal, by evaluating them, then socializing the idea by having a very elaborate computer model that'll give us a virtual experience of an Omega system at any given location, and then have a workshop about it. Bring all the stakeholders into the room. Bring everybody that would be involved, all the people involved in solar and aquaculture, the engineers that do marine engineering, the bureaucrats that decide how we're going to use our environment. We're going to bring all the people together in a room just like this, and we're going to tell them how the system would work by our virtual modeling that will allow us to adjust all the parameters because we have computing power for this. And then we're going to implement a demonstration scale large enough to convince us that it'll work, small enough to mitigate the risk and not lose a lot of money and make a lot of mistakes. And then, once we know it works and we've tested it, we're going to commercialize it and we'll have an Omega system. So what are the requirements? We need a city that produces wastewater, which means it has to have people. And then we need a bay, a calm bay, because we want to start out without having to use too much really elaborate engineering to keep things functional. The wastewater plant, and most cities, most coastal cities have wastewater plants that just dump the water offshore. That water will be then utilized for building an Omega system, a prototype system initially that we will test. So where are we going to do this? We've looked all around the world, and there are lots of good locations, but as sea level rises, there's going to be a lot more good locations that will arise. But that's okay, we're going to be adapting by doing this floating technology. When we looked in Europe, the Mediterranean, of course, was ideal. And within the Mediterranean, the best place we could find was Greece. Guess what? Cities on coastlines with wastewater that can be treated, and most importantly, the whole coast of Attica would be ideal because not only do we have a good coastline, but we have the right people. The people that know how to do marine engineering, that do solar, do aquaculture. And in fact, you can go on Google and look up this place called Trip in View, and you can survey in really beautiful pictures the whole coastline of Greece. And the map of all the wastewater treatment plants, here it is. You have loads of wastewater treatment plants that are doing different levels of treatment. And we've looked at a place like Igoumenitsa that will be perfect for an Omega system. And there's a wastewater plant already there pumping water out into the bay. We will soon realize that that wastewater that's pumped offshore should be used for growing algae rather than wasting it by throwing it offshore. And the nutrients in the wastewater will go to the algae, and the water will go back to us by purification. And we've developed a really nice purification system that's much better than desalination for recycling wastewater. We need people that know about wastewater and wastewater engineering, and that know how to grow microalgae, the fastest growing plants on the planet. And by the way, 90% of the fossil oil that we currently harvest came from microalgae. We need people that know how to do solar panels that will outfit our system, possibly wave energy and wind energy. We need people that know how to do aquaculture, so we'll no longer be hunting and gathering in the oceans for the limited supplies of fish that are left. We'll be cultivating the oceans the way we've been cultivating land. And we'll be doing it not in the way that you currently cultivate things in Greece, but in this type of integrated system, a system that contains not only the aquaculture under the water, but algae cultivation above the water, wastewater treatment, carbon capture, because the algae use carbon as they grow. We'll be using that same location for water-cooled solar, and the heat that we'll harvest during our solar activities will be used for processing the wastewater. We're building an ecosystem, and the Omega Global Initiative is going to help to make this happen. So who is the Omega Global Initiative? Well, there's a bunch of advisors that are from all over the world. We have advisors who are experts in various areas, including economists, but also engineers and technologists. We have people that are specializing in wastewater. We have people who are specializing in marine activities. We have people who are specializing in water and in algae. We have people from Vietnam and all parts of Asia, Hong Kong. And we have people from India. And oh, look, there's Nikki. We have a person from Greece. So in addition, we formed what we call the Omega International Youth Council. I call them the team of teens. These are students, mostly high school students, that are providing the Omega group with lots of data from the internet, because these guys cut their teeth on the internet. They know how to use the internet to root out information, and they're really good at it. We're growing this team of students who will be part of the process. We have the Omega ambassadors. Currently, we have about 70 Omega ambassadors, people who've signed up on the internet to help us. And who are these people? They're locals. They're people who know the space that they're living in, and they're saying, wow, you could do an Omega project here. We have a good source place for water. We have plenty of wastewater. We can help you find a source of CO2, and we can get the people that are decision makers on board. You could be part of this. Obviously, as I said, Greece is an ideal place for this. And you have all the right industry people, but we also need people like you just to provide information. Provide information about sites, and provide information about weather, provide information about what it would take to make the Omega system work. I want to go back to Socrates, because he had another quote that I found incredibly interesting. He said, and you can read it, "The secret to change is to focus all of our energy not on criticizing the old, but on building the new." We are going to build a new way of going from getting our food, now cultivating it also in the oceans, beyond the land, transforming our wastewater back into drinking water. We use our water and we throw it away. We can recycle it. We learned that a long time ago in space station from NASA, that the water that goes through us can easily be cleaned and used again, much easier than cleaning seawater. And energy. We know the consequences of continuing to hunt and gather fossil sources of energy. Those fossil sources of energy are limited, and they're having a huge impact on the planet. We need to start cultivating our energy in biomass from algae cultivation and solar, and in maybe wind and maybe wave, depending on the location. But the solar energy is in Greece, fantastic. The Omega project is going to create this kind of systems thinking, a system that's like an ecosystem of technology. So I want to end with a quote and a reminder that in ancient Athens, citizens were asked to take an oath, and that oath in part said that we will leave the city, we promise to leave the city of Athens greater, better, and more beautiful than we received it. And here we are today in a sort of 21st century Parthenon, and we too need to take an oath. And our oath should be, we need to leave the earth better, more beautiful, more sustainable than we received it. And failure is not an option. Thank you.